Games that killed their studios.
Games that ended up killing the studio that they came from. Ready, set, go. Remember the big old Saints Row reboot?
Yo! Saints Row has got to have the most hilarious fucking gaming story out there. I was so locked into the second and the first Saints Row game. I don't know what the fuck they did with the third game. On God, that's crazy. The first 5 seconds, you got me cracking up. I remember playing the first 2 Saints Row games with my cousin and my older brother, and we was geeking off that shit as if it was GTA, bro. It was a solid competitor, and fuck it being a competitor, it was just a solid iteration, you know, a solid addition to the GTA life sim thugged out type of video game, and you don't really get that anymore. There's like no real competitors, there's no real additional games in the market that can compete with Rockstar at all. And I really genuinely thought that the first 2 Saints Row games were there, and if they could have just got the packaging right on the third game, they could have really had something super special, because they had something special already with the first 2 games. I don't know what the hell these devs were smoking, but you guys got off to a terrible start. Deserved downfall.
A few years ago, the Saints Row series was pretty awesome, and it was developed by Volition. And you know what? If this reboot would have released outside of the vacuum of it being a reboot of Saints Row, like it was like its own brand new IP releasing for the first time, it probably would have scored maybe like 10 points higher than what it scored with typical Metacritic reviews.
Yeah, but it was just a bad game anyways.
On its
like,
own,
it was just a bad
it's
game
a very basic
regardless.
7 out of 10 game maybe. As a Saints Row game, it is straight up offensive to the Saints Row legacy.
It's a 2,
we can go
bro.
on and
It's a
on
2.
and on about
I'm
Saints
giving it a
Row's
3.
reboot and how it doesn't live up to what the original 3 games.
Look at that, bruh. First, I don't really know what they was doing with the third game. I'm gonna be for real, okay? I played a little bit of the third game. Fourth game, the niggas introduced like Star Wars shit, which is not bad on its own. It's not Saints Row though. Again, I looked at the first 2 Saints Row games as iconic fucking pieces of media right there. The third one, it's all right. I consider the third one the beginning of the downfall. Y'all can hate me in the comments. I'm cool with that. I can handle the negativity. The first 2 games, though, on my life, the first 2 games was gas. Them niggas had cheat codes through the phone like it was GT. Like, I'm telling you, a solid addition to the genre, to the format. I'll wait. When's the next time we got something? Mind's Eye? That's just doodles.
I guess you could say 4 or even 4.5.
Hell nah, bro. I do gotta say though, Saints Row 4 got a gas cover art, and Saints Row Get Out of Hell also gas cover art.
Games were, which is wild because Saints Row jumps the shark multiple times throughout its series. Saints Row Reboot, very much so, was branded as a game that was going to return to the roots of Saints Row. A lot of people were optimistic that the reboot would make things feel like the Saints Row 2 and Saints Row 3 days, where with Saints Row 2, it took things pretty seriously, though
yeah, it did.
Sometimes it would go a little bit over the top. Saints Row 3 would have its over the top moments, but still kept things rooted and grounded, enough so at the very least there was a floor. Sure, things go off the rails with 4 and Get Out of Hell, but at that point, we had enough time rooted to the ground where at least we were still invested in the characters and the world to an extent. What's weird about the reboot, though, was that this game didn't even really jump the shark. It's just weird. I look at Saints Row, the reboot, almost like Sunset Overdrive. It's like it's too colorful, and they shifted the market to kind of just be this campy, I want to try my hardest to be relatable. Like Saints Row, the reboot is exactly what you think of when you hear the words cringy writing. Like when you hear woke writing, that type of mentality, Saints Row is what comes to mind. The reboot wasn't good. Repetitiveness aside, my biggest issue with Saints Row was the cringy writing.
Seriously,
that's what I'm saying. It was just bad. It was objectively just terrible job.
How's the job?
I don't understand how you can get in a writer's room and genuinely say, yeah, we did a really good job with that. Because you either hire people that have never truly been in the situations that they're talking about, or you just have people that genuinely are just guessing. Like I don't get it. I don't know. I don't get it. I just don't
It's the
get
murder
it.
business. Fundamentals don't change, just the uniform.
I can tell you love it.
Okay, I don't have to love it. I have to pay my student loans.
Amen.
Why are they talking about like the main character needing to pay student loans and that he kills people for money? If he's a career criminal, why is he worried about how he's gonna pay his student loans back?
Yeah, literally. They're not gonna fucking come arrest you for not paying your student loans. Fuck your credit. That's it.
Like, bro, like that is not a priority. You're not paying your loans if you're a criminal. I don't know. And that right there, that's like just in the beginning of the game. That sets the tone though for what you experience over and over.
Like, it's different if the precedent was, damn, man, you know, my daughter's sick. Insert Sandman from Spider-Man. Makes sense. Insert Deathstroke. Deadshot. Like, people that committing things, you know, they're committing heinous crimes because they have sick family members. It's cool if it's a moral dilemma. Not, yeah, bro, I'm murking these niggas because I gotta pay student loans. You know, I gotta jack them for everything that they have. Huh? Nigga, what?
Over and over throughout the
Crazy.
Saints Row rebooted campaign. It doesn't really have a legacy tying things back to the old games, not even really thematically outside of a few Easter eggs. The sandbox world was actually pretty cool. I think that they did a good job building out the world.
It's very colorful. Like he said, would be a fine game. It's like context matters so much, right? If you walk in on somebody that just slaps the fuck out of somebody, context matters. What if they was provoked? Or was it completely unjustified? Context matters. The game, the world looks really vibrant. But the moment that you connect the words Saints Row and you understand what the fuck that means, you lose all credibility.
Which would have made the rest of the game relatively easy to land pretty well, I think. But instead, they just had some of the worst writing I've ever seen in a AAA game like this. And that's saying a lot because there's some games that have really bad writing out.
I still don't get why we went through a phase where it felt like every form of like new game that came out had to be layered with an agenda. You know, I hate the people that are on Twitter that like talk about this dumb shit and they're like, hey, I don't see the big deal. I mean, it's just relatable writing. Nothing about it is relatable. Nobody talks the way that they talk. Nobody animates and moves the way that they move. Nobody has like the conversations that they're having in the way that they're having it. They have them in like the most unnatural ways. And it was being pushed in so many things, man. In so many things. And every now and then we're still getting them. I remember the newest Dragon Age game being played with that bullshit.
There. But I really do think that the Saints Row writing just like makes you want to, I don't know, curl your toenails up in some weird way. I don't know. And after Saints Row did finally launch,
That's a tough cover art though.
and it
that's a
was
tough cover art.
received pretty mixed and it did pretty poorly in sales. Right away, the studio would start seeing layoffs and things would really only get worse from there. Now, the company that owned Volition, Embracer, did try to move things around and keep the company going for a little while, but ultimately, Embracer would fall into some pretty serious financial troubles themselves, ones that we'll go into later on in this video. But the big takeaway is that when Embracer had to really start cutting cost spending across the board,
Jump to wingsuit. Every time that I see something that says jump to wingsuit or anything adjacent of it, I immediately think of what was it? It wasn't Mad Max, but it was another game that shared a similar title to it.
About
Just Cause, actually. Just
a
Cause.
year or so
Specifically
after
Just Cause
Saints
3.
Row's reboot launched, Volition was not in a good position to be
You know what I remember about Volition? Them responding to backlash with memes and basically saying, cry about it, bro. This is our company. Guess what? You know what happens when you do shit like that? If you actually have a community and then your community is giving you backlash, maybe try to be reasonable and listen to what they're saying a little bit. You know what I'm saying? I don't really have that much of a community yet. But if I got a community and then the community is saying, hey, bro, this isn't cool, I would try to see where they're coming from and then have just a reasonable conversation. on the same end, I understand just being like, fuck you, I'm going to do what I want to do. Great. Do that. But you're going to do that and you're going to fail. You're going to do that and you're going to ruin your fan base. You just got to find another one. But if your writing is just that bad and overall you're not getting enough support in-house or exteriorly, where people are like supporting you, giving you enough money for you to go on to the next game to prove yourself again, you're done, bro. You've already proved that you're a bad company. You don't listen to the community. The community loved what you had, and if you can't bring them just an updated version of that, they're gonna abandon you. We're having the same debate and conversation right now when it comes to Dragon Ball Xenoverse 3, literally on the channel in my last couple videos. We're having this debate right now.
Be saved and get to.
Like, if you get popping for something, I get maybe you not wanting to do the same thing over and over, but you're literally putting out the exact same game using a similar formula, but your execution is terrible.
Stay open. And thus, the Saints Row reboot that was supposed to revive the franchise.
Like, if you wanted to do more shit, just rebrand it. Completely don't like literally
the development studio. Nowadays, when you think of first-party titles from the big three video game consoles, a lot might come to mind, like God of War or Last of Us for PlayStation. Literally.
Damn, you know what's crazy is he talk about the big three consoles. I swear that my brain, is it just me that my brain doesn't think of Nintendo as like crazy in the console space like that anymore? Like how they used to be. I remember being hooked on GameCube. Fuck, even the Wii a little bit. Wii U maybe even. I just feel like ever since the Switch came out, my brain has disassociated Nintendo in any console conversation. I don't know what the fuck it is about it. I look at the Switch and it does, like, Nintendo doesn't even come to mind. When I hear somebody say, yeah, I play games on console, I'm in my brain, it's Xbox, PlayStation. Fuck a Nintendo Switch, bro. But it is a comparable, also, like, you know, addition there. It's just so much weaker than the other consoles. Maybe not the Switch 2. I got to see more stats and reviews on that. But definitely the first one. For sure, the first Switch was way out surpassed by the competitors, being PlayStation and Xbox. And then, you know, you throw in PC in there, but that's not console. But when you bring it back, it was like PlayStation 1, PS2, Xbox 360, GameCube. You know, you bringing it back to like those era shit. Yeah, I thought Nintendo, I thought console, GameCube. But I feel like Nintendo just hasn't been in the conversation of console in a long time for me.
Really, anything under the sun for Nintendo. It honestly, anything they put out can easily become a mascot for them. And the memory of when Halo was good for Xbox. But I want to specifically look at the generation of the PlayStation 3, Xbox 360, and Wii. Because if you guys remember, the PlayStation 3 was off to a little bit of a bumpy start during that generation.
I'm just saying, Sony. You've been here before. Wow, I remember. I'm old, bro. 26. I remember when YouTube and the internet in general looked like this. It was very blocky. Wasn't all this super optimized slickness that we have now. But oh my lord, bro. Sony. Every chance that I get, I got to just tell you my disdain. I'm disappointed in you as a company. Disappointed in your options and choices of CEOs and people that you choose to run the PlayStation division. You got to get it together. You are a monumental juggernaut when it comes to gaming. You're fucking it up for everybody right now, bro. You're stinking up the whole place. You're that one kid in gym class that doesn't know that they're reeking and absolute stanking up the whole place. Don't want to put any deodorant on. Refusing to do anything, saying, I'm just going to be all natural. Nigga, don't give a fuck about that. Go put some deodorant on. Take a bath. Shower, you dirty, nasty fuck. That's what Sony is right now. Stinking up the whole gaming market. I'll just keep playing my 360. Oh my god, bro. Hold on. Run that shit back.
Xbox 360 and Wii. Because if you guys remember, the PlayStation 3 was off to a little bit of a bumpy start during that
because they tried to fucking sell the PS3 for goddamn like $700.
Generation.
your PS3. I'll just keep playing 360.
Hope this song has helped you understand. Now you know how you killed your brand.
On God, bro, where is he at? We need another one. We need another one for the PS5, bro. Run that shit back one more time.
Of a bumpy
Run it back
during that generation.
Sony, you went wrong
with your PS3. I'll just keep playing like 360. Bro, he hits that shit, bro. Hold on, let me get the fucking subtitles, bro. I want to hit this shit with him. Sony, you went wrong with your PS3. I'll just keep playing like 360. You understand. Now you build your brand. I'm sorry, bro. I gotta run it back one more time, bro. He ran that
was off
shit,
to a little bit of a bumpy start during that generation.
Sony, you did wrong with your PS3. I'll just keep playing my 360. I'll help you understand. Well, now you killed your brand.
And while
Bro,
they
that
definitely
shit's
had
gas.
some really big, heavy-hitting first-party
gas.
games during that era,
Damn, I miss music like that, bro. I miss music like that. You young and you don't know about music like that, do some history, bro. I feel like an old head saying that shit, but I miss voices like that.
2007, Sony published a game that
We need
was
a new one.
potentially supposed to be another one of their big, heavy-hitting first-party self-published games. A
I know
game
what game
that
he's talking
flopped
about,
so
too.
hard,
I know what
I
game he's talking about,
literally
too.
didn't even know that it existed until I was just randomly doing research on different game studios for this video, and I didn't realize that this was a game, and it was really big. Has anyone out there actually played the game Lair? This game released at the end of the year in
Lair was some dookie juice, bro. Lair was straight dumpster garbage. Just, it wasn't a good game. I remember this cover art, playing bits and pieces. Don't remember anything about the game. I just remember it being a bad game and having to trade it back in.
2007, almost a year after the PlayStation 3's launch, and was set up to hopefully be a big holiday selling game. And who knows, maybe it would have opened doors for the game to potentially become a big franchise. And it was developed by none other than
basically like a
Factor
launch title.
5, who had a
Damn near.
really good reputation and a really good track record, and they were really famous for their work on the Rogue Squadron series.
I swear, GameCube. If you was to ask me what's a more iconic console, PS2 or GameCube, nigga, I'm going GameCube. I'm sorry, bruh. Nintendo was hitting different at this time. Nintendo was hitting different with the Dreamcast, 64. Well, did Nintendo own the Dreamcast or no? But I don't know, man. The Nintendo 64 into the GameCube era, it's hard to beat for me, man. GameCube, here's the thing. GameCube to me was defined by Mario Sunshine. Not to even bring up that they had every experience that you could want on the PlayStation and PlayStation 2 on GameCube. You wanted to play Resident Evil? GameCube. You want to play Mario Sunshine? GameCube. You want to play Smash Bros? GameCube. You want to do anything super fucking cool? GameCube. Like anything PlayStation could have, GameCube. GameCube was the old PC, on God, bro. Fight me in the comments about that shit. GameCube was the old PC. Anything and everything that you wanted from PlayStation, you could get from the GameCube, but you had more options. That's the thing. You had more options. I get that you could probably say the same thing for the Switch now, right? Because there's a lot of games that come out for the Switch. That shit is not performing at the same level like the PlayStation is, bro. But at the GameCube, they were all kind of relatively same equal space. But them motherfuckers was smacking them out the water. Like, bro, when Smash Bros came out during that era, you couldn't tell me anything about PlayStation. You couldn't, bro. And I had both. I had all of them. And I would have preferred to pop in the GameCube. I think the GameCube is one of, if not the greatest console of all time, next to the PS2. Those two got to be the best two consoles ever created.
during the previous generation of consoles, and on top of that, they had some technology that was being implemented in various games throughout the years as well. But from 2003 until the release of Lair in 2007, they released 0 new games. So they were cooking up something big, right? And Lair, visually speaking, looked very impressive. Which of course caused the game to get a lot of hype.
Look at the
I mean, this
CGI
was
too.
the next generation in full swing, and I mean, look how visually impressive this is. Mind you, imagine this is like 2007 and you're looking at this. But then, when the game came out, people realized that the
I mean, the game is comparable to God of War.
visuals were kind of the only thing that the
Visual-wise.
game had going for it, because the gameplay itself was rough. You see, the PlayStation 3 era introduced the 6-axis controller.
Mm-hmm. And it was something about them releasing games during that era where it was just a gimmick. There were so many games that came out during this era where it was like, hey, look at this gimmick that we have in it. You play the game, and like that's the only thing that matters in the game.
Controller that had motion controls. Yay. And it wasn't like in the fun way how the Wii did it. This was like...
Yeah, and then every controller since then has had motion controls, but hardly any developers actually implement anything to do with
a weird controller. And it was just like a game that probably could have just played fine with a normal controller. But if you wanted...
And I don't get why they just never fine-tuned that shit so you could play racing games with it. Like you want, and yeah, like flying dragons around, that would be cool. Make a How to Train Your Dragon game based on this would be great. Just make it fun, make the gameplay fun. Don't make the whole selling point the feature. Make the game fun, and a selling point is the game is fun. In addition to it being fun, it also utilizes this feature in a cool way.
To like turn left, you had to tilt the controller left. You wanted to dive, you had to tilt it forward.
Like the way that they're doing haptic feedback right now. That's cool. Haptic feedback is awesome in the newer controllers. It really feels like you're pulling down a bowstring in God of War or any other first-party title. More games need to take advantage of that. But during this era where it was just like, I'm going to move my controller around. I have vibration controls. I can do this. It's like the same thing when they introduce QuickTime events. Like, God damn, bro, leave the QuickTime events in the past. Nobody cares, brother. Oh, my Lord.
If you wanted to roll, you had to like twist your wrists, and it just, I don't know, a whole lot of the gameplay.
I just was not a fan. They just made games during this era to just be the gimmick first, gameplay second or third. It was visuals, gimmick, gameplay somewhere else.
Seems to at least be mostly like trying to correct the game's controls, making things weird. There was apparently a whole controversy even when the game started getting the reviews that were bad for the game, and apparently Sony ended up sending out like a big stack of like guides for the reviewers to like maybe change their opinion and try to understand the controls and what they were trying to do with the game.
You're reviewing our game
better,
poorly because
which
you're
is
not
weird.
understanding
And
how
at
to play
launch,
the game.
you could only play with the motion
that's
controls.
not it at all.
Though they did roll out an update later that allowed you to play with analog sticks, thank God. But this is just one of those cases where the game being bad hurts because of how great everything else looked. I mean, there's this huge scale to the game, and the battles were cinematic, and it looked like they were really ambitious in trying to build out this world and create something awesome. And from what I've heard of the soundtrack, it sounds really, really good. So it just stings even worse when the gameplay is just like this. I don't know. And while Lair wasn't developed by an in-house studio...
You know what one of the other things was? Is that it was too new of a tech. Like the game, that gameplay loop was too new. You gotta slowly and gradually introduce somebody to that. You can't just say, here's a whole brand new game. It's only using this. 2007, by the way. Like, no. Allow us to use the analog. Then let us slowly get used to using that feature.
Belonging to Sony,
for like more
was
advanced
published
gameplay
by
or something.
Sony, and it was a PS3 exclusive game. I'd bet my damn dollar that had this game done well, Sony would have outright purchased the company, because this was during a time where they were really trying to make these partnerships and really try to step up their games for the following years, because the launch of the PS3 wasn't doing so hot compared to the Xbox 360. But Lair scoring like 3 to 5 out of 10s across the board did not bode too well here, and instead, Factor 5 was quickly running out of money when Lair failed to meet both critical and financial expectations. And ultimately, they ran out of runway within a year of Lair's release, and they ended up shutting down in May of 2009. What's crazy is on top of all of that, there was litigation with former employees.
You know, one of the things that I think a lot of developers suffer from, and I think all of us can learn a valuable lesson in what I'm about to say. Sometimes you have an idea and you just are so caught up in the idea of it that you just keep on pushing for it to be completed without actually understanding the implications of said idea. And then it just ruins the whole execution process, because you're just like, wow, I spent so much time thinking about this and now I feel completely defeated because I spent too much of my brain power on this shit and none of it fucking mattered because you didn't think about all the other things that factor into the experience that you're trying to execute. You just had the idea and just kept on developing on the access of that idea. And that's exactly what they did here. The idea of using the controller, the idea of these motion controls, the idea of these cinematic battles, the idea of having this whole shtick. But you didn't even think about how the player would feel when the normal game out at that time, and still to this day, was analog stick to play the game. Like, you're breaking somebody's brain to play this game and then saying there's no other way to play it. I'm sorry. You just got to learn, my nigga. Like, come on, man.
After the fact, where apparently Factor 5 didn't pay their employees for the work that they did in November and December. Now, I couldn't find
That's
any
the worst
updates
thing
on
you
what
wanna do.
happened with this litigation. I assume things got settled out of court, but it was a really big deal and a big story back in 2009 because it was just employees straight up saying that they were defrauded by their company that they worked at. So let's pour one out for the homie Factor 5 that ended up shutting down, and hope we can remember them for their Star Wars Rogue Squadron games and that Indiana Jones and the Infernal Machine game from 1999. Because at least that game was kind of fun, even if it was a little mid sometimes.
Yeah, I love
Do
games
any of
like
you
that
remember
era.
this game from 2012?
Fucking, I remember the hell out of like playing games like that, like Siphon Filter. Oh, so good, so good. Shooters that used to look like this
It was kind of fun.
so good. We could never go back to this time. Tomb Raider
Even if
could
it was
never
a
go
little
back
mid
to this time.
sometimes.
Do any of you remember this game from 2012? It has a wild story behind
no,
it.
actually,
it all
the-
started in 2006.
the
There's
cover
this
art looks
guy, and he's playing for the
familiar.
Red Sox, and he's on track to win his third World Series title with them. But he is also a massive MMO nerd, spending hours on EverQuest and World of Warcraft. And this guy's name is Kurt Schilling. And in 2006, he forms a studio, and that studio, after a couple name changes, became known as 38 Studios, named after his jersey number. And his big dream is to
That's
make
actually gas. I love that
38
design.
Studios, named after his jersey number. And his
So
big
38
dream is
Studios
to
shut
make
down?
a World of Warcraft killer. His dream MMO that is gonna be better than any MMO ever. And so that's what 38 Studios starts working on. They make a game internally known as Project Copernicus. And yeah, this is gonna be a big MMO project that's gonna spawn a massive fantasy franchise that's gonna be
See, the problem with big MMO shit is it's make or break, bruh. If you don't make that shit connect with an audience, you wasted millions, sometimes hundreds of millions of dollars to get the servers up and running, keeping the servers wide enough, updating the servers, keeping an ever-present server. Just keeping it alive costs so much fucking money. Then there's the assets of it all. And then there's paying the people to make the shit. Like, dog, making an MMO is expensive. So if you're saying I want a World of Warcraft killer, you gotta really bring the heat and the ideas
along the lines of something
the
like Lord
execution.
of the Rings. Kurt Schilling even believed that this was the start of a billion-dollar company, and he must have really believed this was all gonna work out because he poured roughly $50 million into the studio, which is
damn.
a massive amount of his career earnings. And he would hire a lot
Especially
of
during
creative
that
people
time.
from projects that he respected. Like, they would hire Ken Rolston, the lead designer of Morrowind and Oblivion. So as they're building out this MMO world and this development is going on, in 2009 they buy another company from THQ called Big Huge Games, and they reshape one of the projects that Big Huge Games were working on and turn it into a single player RPG that will be set in this world of the MMO that they're creating. And that's the game that I was talking about earlier, Kingdoms of Amalur Reckoning. It's not a bad game at all. It's actually pretty good. And I don't think Kingdoms of Amalur Reckoning was supposed to be like a quick cash grab either. Like, they really wanted to flesh out this
So how did this
fantasy world.
shut down the
and
studio?
even legendary video game composer Grant Kirkhope was involved in the soundtrack for Kingdoms of Amalur Reckoning. So even for this project, they hired top-tier talent. But the fact that they bought this studio was a massive financial investment, and they already had the main studio, 38 Studios, working on this
That shit
MMO,
is
and now
true.
they had to also finance and take on debt for this other studio that was also eating up cost with developing Kingdoms of Amalur. So they were quickly running out of cash, and they started looking for investors or loans or anything. And eventually, in 2010, the state of Rhode Island stepped in and approved a $75 million loan
The
guarantee
state
in exchange
of
for
Rhode
the studio
Island?
moving to the state and hitting the job creation milestone of 450 employees by 2012. So they were aggressively trying to create jobs in the area. But $75 million are not quite enough to make an MMO. And I mean, there's cancelled MMO projects that have eaten up way more, like the cancelled Halo MMO. And by 2011, reportedly,
That's what I'm
they
saying,
had spent
bro.
over $118 million with zero revenue coming in. And at that point, they were banking on Kingdoms of Amalur Reckoning to sell enough copies to pay off the debt, which was gonna release in 2012, and they just had to hold on a little longer. The thing with that is, though, that just to break even, Kingdoms of Amalur would have had to sell 3 million copies, which is very unlikely for a new IP, especially
Yeah,
in
facts.
2012. And so, in 2012, it all came crashing down. Firstly, Kingdoms of Amalur Reckoning released, and I mean, review well, and it would sell over 1 million copies in the first couple months, but that was nowhere near the 3 million copies they needed, and there was no funds coming in at this point.
Overshot, bro. Overshot. You made a really good game and expected
And
too
in May
much
of
from it.
2012, they used the last $1.1 million they had in the bank for a payment to Rhode Island. And with that, they weren't able to pay anyone anymore, whether that's creditors or employees. So in late May, Schilling sent a single company-wide email laying off nearly 400 employees, and 38 Studios would file
Damn.
for bank email laying
The company is experiencing an economic downturn. To avoid further losses and possibility of retrenchment, the company has decided that the company-wide layoff is absolutely necessary. These layoffs are non-voluntary and non-disciplinary. This is your official notice of layoff, effective today, Thursday, March 20th.
off nearly
That
400
sucks.
employees, and 38 Studios would file for bankruptcy. And with the way the assets were liquidated and split up during the bankruptcy, most of the employees didn't even receive their last paycheck. But it's not like Kurt Schilling just got out of it. He actually was personally responsible for the debt they had taken on, which eventually meant that on top of losing the 15 million that he put in, he also had to sell a bunch of stuff to pay back the debt, like his memorabilia collection, assets
Damn.
that were in gold that were worth millions of dollars, and his 7-bedroom mansion. So at the end of the day, that MMO that they were working on obviously never came out and was cancelled, and the rights to Kingdom
it
of
does
Amalur
sound like a
were
cool
auctioned off,
concept,
and that's how in
man.
2020 a remaster with the title Kingdoms of Amalur Re-Reckoning released. 38 Studios closed down for good, and Big Huge Games shut down for a while as well, but during the bankruptcy auctions, some of the original founders of Big Huge Games bought the trademark for the studio and would later revive it, and they're actually still around and are now part of Nexon. Schilling later revealed that they
Damn.
almost secured a publishing deal and funding for Kingdoms of Amalur 2.
I know those people are winning because they bought the studio from them, which means that they got paid for that. And then the other studio went down, but their personal funds could still be
in
great.
2012, but the issues with paying the state of Rhode Island, which were public at the time, scared the publisher of a potential Kingdoms of Amalur 2 away. Still, I'm kind of highly doubtful that that would have saved the company at that point. And also, he admitted personally that the MMO they were building just wasn't actually fun, and that nobody at the office really wanted to even play the game themselves. So yeah, Kingdoms of Amalur is a good game, but it did partly take down 2 studios actually, because yeah, somehow they were banking on this game to be like the next Elder Scrolls or something. Which, to put it nicely, is dreaming very, very, very big.
I think a great example
Yeah,
of a
I mean,
studio
they
that
did
ended up
really
shutting
well, though.
down
1.3
after just
million sales
one
are
bad
fucking
game
great.
was definitely Free Radical. Okay, so get this. The minds that created GoldenEye back in the day,
I was about to
they
say, this
branched
shit
out,
looked
made
like
their own
GoldenEye,
studio,
man.
and then made Time
And GoldenEye was the golden fucking ticket. Any developer at that time, copy that style, you got a banger on your hands if it's promoted correctly.
Splitters. Really solid first-person shooter games, by the way. They made the beloved Star Wars Battlefront and Star Wars Battlefront 2, which are still talked about to this day, the original 2. And then they made Haze, the Halo killer for the PS3 that was exclusive originally.
Hey, not too much on Hayes, bro. Not too much.
And while this
Not too
specific
much.
game,
That fucking you used to see people with this fucking
the
PlayStation
Halo
icon
killer for the PS3,
everywhere. Not too much on
that
Haze.
was exclusive originally.
Not too much, bro.
And while this specific game wasn't the only reason this studio essentially went under, not once, not twice, but 3 times, kind of, but Haze not performing well did contribute to a pretty big snowball effect that put the studio in a pretty tough position.
It was an
now,
okay
I think Haze's
game, not too
shortcomings
much.
definitely are contributed to the fact that this game was probably marketed in a pretty wild way. Ubisoft kind of leaned into the whole Halo killer idea for the PS3, and a lot of gaming press outlets picked up on it, which kind of automatically set an impossible bar for Haze to fit into. But the hype definitely created this like a moving target that this game was supposed to fit into.
Yeah, you also
and
never want to promote your game as, I'm the Halo fucking killer. Nigga, do you know how big Halo was when it came out? You're not killing shit. You're not killing shit, my nigga. By the time this shit came out, Halo probably had Halo 2 or 3 out already. 2008, my nigga, they already had an establishment right there, bro. They established the fuck out of their genre. They established the hell out of the generation. Niggas knew Halo, and they gonna forever know Halo. 100 years from now, niggas gonna know Halo, okay? People complain now for the downfall of Halo because 343 Studios fucked that shit up, okay? Halo is Halo regardless. Regardless if you like it, my nigga, regardless if I like it. Halo is Halo. You're not killing Halo. So don't promote it to be a Halo killer. You should have just promoted it to be a contender.
when the game released, it not only wasn't as good as Halo, but it wasn't even remotely close to the same level as Halo. Mind you, this is 2008. This was like peak Halo 3 era.
That's
Now,
what I just said that. They got like 3 games out already. Come on.
behind the scenes, there were complications, of course. Early on in development, they wanted to build a brand new engine specifically to be used in Haze. They decided to do this while simultaneously building the game, which, whenever this type of thing happens where they try to build an engine and develop a game at the same time, it seems like there's always issues in the pipeline because you can't, polish things up or experiment with things when the tools are like constantly being updated or they're changing as you're developing things. So I think ultimately this just cut into the amount of time that the developers would have had to polish things up, make things feel more fluid. On top of that, early on, Haze was a game that was planned for PC, 360, and PS3 before it became just a PS3 exclusive. The team struggled with trying to figure out the infamous PS3 cell processor, which was like an issue for the PS3 back in the day. It was just
Yeah, it was
known
an
to be
issue for every
slightly
game
harder to
ever.
develop for, especially like if you're developing for the 360 and the PC, that's kind of like one thing. But then when you're building something also for the PS3 sometimes can be like a little bit wonky early on, I think. I don't know. I'm not a game developer, so take that as a grain of salt.
Yeah, but game devs have been complaining about that shit forever. That's why they ask for these dev kits years in advance.
But that's just like what
so
the
they can
rumor
figure
mill
that
has
shit
spread
out.
over the years. If you've developed a game for the PS3, though, at some point, let me know if I'm wrong. But from what I can assume, and from what interviews tell us, it seems like the fact that the PS3 was making things a little bit harder to get the game running and working and polished and stuff, they had to focus more time on just getting the game, performing well. And they had to try to get it to a stable frame rate, and they couldn't work on things like gameplay or AI and other types of things. By the time the game actually launched, it still had technical issues. I mean, there was like screen tearing, I think. The resolution, I don't think even hit
Damn,
720p
576?
natively, which back in the day, that wasn't the
EDTV.
biggest deal. It was kind of common, but looking back now, this is supposed to be the Halo killer. How's it killing Halo? I looked it up. It was running in 576p. So definitely not 720p. It was upscaled through the PS3 console, but it's not like true HD. And yeah, 720p was a difficult target to hit. I mean, Halo 3 a year
Jeez.
earlier was not at 720p. It was at 640p. That's
Okay.
a higher resolution than Haze. And there was just a ton of other things that were hyped up. Like the story was hyped up, AI thing that was supposed to be cutting edge, and then it turned out to, not be. And Haze definitely was a flop. At least I think it was.
Eventually
Currently,
so.
it sits at around
Eventually,
55
chat.
out of 100 on
Have kids.
Metacritic.
They're
which
beautiful.
in gaming
They're
terms is really
wonderful.
good. Now, VG Charts, which I don't know how
Not too early,
accurate it
though.
is, claims that this game sold just under 1 million units, which does seem pretty low for a game that had this much hype behind it. But man, that box art was really cool. I don't care about the game anymore. I mean, look at this
I'm telling you, man, not too much on Haze, bro. Not too much on
box
it,
art.
bro.
This is
Calm
neat. I like
down,
it.
not
So,
too
one
much
bad
on
game
it.
in Haze, and all hell breaks loose.
That shit
apparently,
was
because
hitting.
this game was hyped up so much that even the industry noticed, and publishers were all of a sudden hesitant to throw their money at games that Free Radical had been working on. Now, Free Radical probably missed out on a lot of money they potentially could have had Haze been a big success, but they were still working away at Star Wars Battlefront 3, and it got canceled. What's interesting is that during the development of Haze, Star Wars Battlefront 3 was in active development, allegedly reaching a 99% completed mark before the plug was pulled, which meant Free Radical was going to be losing out on even
that
more
has to
money.
suck
Even more so, what's
bad.
interesting is that we later found out that Star Wars Battlefront 4 was in pre-production and during the concept art phase and had a targeted release date of 2009.
I couldn't imagine being so like it happens at my own job where you're like so interested in doing something and then they're just like, yeah, nah, we're not doing that right now. It's like, bro, come the fuck on.
So Star Wars Battlefront 3 and then Star Wars Battlefront 4 also got canceled. That's so wild to me. On top of all of this, Free Radical was struggling to secure a publisher for Time Splitters 4. I guess there just wasn't interest there. 2008 was pretty hard already on Free Radical. They were practically bleeding money. And at the end of the year, it was announced that the studio was going to be entering administration, which essentially is bankruptcy. Most of the staff
Damn.
had no idea that the studio was going under. Essentially, employees went to
Damn,
the
I didn't know we was
office and the
revisiting
doors were
shit
locked.
like
and then,
Haze,
there was
man. Not
security
too
there, and,
much on
it's
it,
telling
bro.
the staff to
Move
to a
on,
hotel
bro,
area,
move
and
on.
that's where the employees found out that the company was going under. Majority of the staff ended up essentially being fired. 143 positions were lost, and 40
was
people got to
cool,
stay behind
bro. It
to
was
keep the
cool.
company
Stop
running
it.
because there was still interest from other bigger companies to maybe purchase the studio, which did end up happening. Crytek ended up acquiring the studio, and then from there, the company was renamed to Crytek UK. Now, remember how I said this studio somehow managed to go under 3 times? We've only covered the first one. There's 2 more times, but to understand this even further, it involves another studio that also went under.
I
So
did forget
we're
you
gonna
say it went
pause
down
on
3
the whole
times.
Free Radical Crytek and come back in a second, because now we have to change gears to fully understand this and talk about Homefront of all games. What is going on here? I don't know what the deal was with early 2010s where just every game franchise was trying to be the blank video game killer. By 2011, Call of Duty was already on top, at least for first-person shooters. For whatever reason, THQ was hyping up Homefront and had huge
Homefront was cool, bro. Homefront was cool. But I remember the COD killer supposed to be fucking God damn, what's the name of that game? Resistance, bro. I remember Resistance, the newer Resistance games or some shit. They were supposed to be the
expectations
COD
for this
killers.
game. Some people online were even discussing as to whether or not this was going to be the
Not
Call
too
of
much
Duty
on
killer. I even found
Resistance
this old
either,
Game
bro.
Facts forum post where people were discussing it. And THQ wasn't really in the best
THQ, it's in the game.
spot at this point, but they were so sure that Homefront was going to save their company and keep things going
No, that's EA Sports.
and
I was
potentially
about to
position the company
have
to be
somebody
better than ever.
tilted,
They also
bro.
spent a ton of money on marketing, like including the infamous San Francisco balloon incident, where they released 10,000 red balloons into the San Francisco Bay, which led to like environmental concerns and stuff. They were really
fuck?
aggressive with their marketing.
Best trailer winner goes to Homefront.
So then when the game comes out and it's not impressive, or as impressive as the hype built things up to be, people would be more vocal about the game not
Nah,
being...
you know what was actually the quote-unquote COD killer, bro? Killzone. Killzone is such a good game, bro. Oh my god, I know it got a lot of hate, and Guerrilla Games ended up just fucking pivoting heavy into making they started making the Horizon Zero Dawn games, like the Horizon games. I wouldn't mind another fucking I would not mind another game from them. I like drop Horizon for a little bit, please. I wouldn't mind if you went back to Killzone. Killzone games were tough, okay? They were tough.
That's good. I think the biggest criticism I watched
Even
was
the
that
newest
game
one
had
that
a
was
3
I
hour
recently,
to 5
like last year, played that game. Still tough.
hour-long campaign for its single player at a $60
The
price point in
hacking,
2011.
That was cool.
Like, bro, what's going on?
Not too much on
Now, the thing is,
Killzone,
like,
bro.
the game wasn't awful. It actually had like a Metacritic score sitting around 70 out of 100 at the time. And that's not necessarily like the worst thing ever, but investors were expecting like a 90 plus score, something that would compete with Halo or Call of Duty. And as a result, THQ's stock price plummeted 21 to 25%
THQ doesn't
in a
really
single
make shit
day.
like that anymore.
Not good
They
to
be
have
making
a
all the Nickelodeon shit now.
huge investor
I remember
confidence
THQ used to
drop
make the wrestling
after what
games
was supposed to be
too.
one of
Them
the
shits
biggest
was gas.
launches. And then on top of all of
THQ
that,
Nordic?
the multiplayer wasn't actually really all that bad. Just nobody was talking about Homefront after that long because it
That's the
already had the
Commando
bad
right there, bro. That's the
reputation for
M4. You can
really
tell by
dropping
the
the ball with the
barrel.
campaign. And the weird thing is that the game still sold relatively well. I think the numbers were like 2.6 million within the first couple of months of the game launching, but apparently
That's good
that
as
was
hell.
still significantly below what THQ had expected. They must have been
Niggas
expecting
be
some
having
crazy
crazy fucking expectations, bruh. Doing too much, bro. Y'all doing tricks on it. If I sold $2.6 million, no, not fuck that. If I sold 2.6 million copies of something, you best believe I'm never having to work another day in my life. Everything else is just gonna be passion projects. 2.6 million, nigga? What? That's
numbers
crazy.
or something, but okay. With the stock dropping significantly after Homefront, you think they would just like leave Homefront alone, but no. THQ wanted to move forward with Homefront 2, the follow-up game. Except something had to be changed, so they ended up closing down Chaos Studios a few months after the launch of Homefront 1. Homefront's development team would be transferred over to THQ Montreal, and in turn, Crytek UK, the Free Radical team that got renamed after the whole Haze debacle we talked about earlier, they were hired by THQ to develop the sequel to Homefront. You see, during 2011 and into 2012, THQ
Damn.
wasn't doing very well. Red Faction Armageddon did not get good reception.
THQ still isn't
announced
doing
that they
well.
would shift their focus away from that series. THQ also had a bunch of like kid games, I guess is the right term to use here. It's
Yup.
probably a better term. You know,
Yup.
movie tie-in games, licensed kids.
That's what I'm saying, bro. THQ is on everything. Cars, Jimmy Neutron, Incredibles. Currently, most notably, THQ is in every fucking Nickelodeon, SpongeBob. And if Nickelodeon wants a game, THQ is making that bitch, bro. Best believe. But I'm saying THQ was doing numbers with the fucking wrestling game SmackDown versus Raw and shit. THQ had it in the bag. They fumbled it.
Series. So, in turn, they closed down their THQ Studio Australia and another studio they had called Blue Tongue. And while they're at it, they also closed down THQ Digital Phoenix, which meant they also were dropping their MX vs. ATV franchise that they'd been working on to focus on like
MX
the
versus ATV was a gas franchise.
hard-hitting games that were high quality and could help build out an IP. 2011 also saw the release of U-Draw for the PS3 and Xbox 360. That was a commercial failure. That really hurt
Trash.
the finances at THQ. In
Trash.
2012, THQ reported a net loss of $239 million for that last fiscal year.
Crazy.
$100 million more than they lost in the previous year. So to no one's surprise, while I guess you could argue Homefront caused Chaos Studios to go under, overall bad decisions as a publisher caused THQ to go under. THQ reported that they weren't going to be able to pay back this $50 million loan that they got from Wells Fargo, and they're pretty
Damn.
much on the verge of bankruptcy. Their stock price was plummeting. They were really desperate because they also had to delay some
Ubisoft
games that they
today.
had coming up, like Company of Heroes 2 and Metro Last Light.
Oh
They
my
teamed up with
gosh,
Humble
Metro Last
Bundle of all
Light.
places to try to raise more money. Believe it or not, they
I
actually
remember
sold
seeing that game everywhere, bro.
100,000 bundles.
I've
which
still
raised,
not
like, $5
completed a
million,
single Metro
which is
game.
great, mind you. They made $5 million in like a last-ditch Hail Mary play, and even the president, Jason Rubin, he wanted to show that he was in it with the team. They were in it together, and they were going to turn that ship around. He even spent $11,050 on a bundle, you know, just as a sign of goodwill that he was in it to help. And a few days after the Humble Bundle THQ partnership ended, they filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. So THQ did have a lot of IPs, and those ended up getting.
That's what I'm saying. Oh my God, I remember this game on GameCube, bro. I'm telling y'all, bro. I think my camera might be covering it. Holy fuck. Is my camera covering that shit? Yeah, bro. I think I'm covering the Avatar game, Destroy All Humans. fuck, bro. Fucking fuck, man. That's what I'm saying. These games were god tier sometimes. Some of these were great. Incredible Games was fire. This was one of the only Avatar games I could genuinely say was a pretty good Avatar game. Avatar: The Last Airbender
spread out across a lot of existing publishers already. But the important one to talk
Deep Silver
ended up getting spread out across.
Yeah. All their shit got fucking spread out. THQ Nordic, Deep Silver has shit, Sega.
A lot of existing publishers already. But the important one to talk about here is Homefront, because Homefront got acquired by Crytek, the developers that were working on Homefront 2. A little later, we would learn that Homefront 2 was actually going to be called Homefront: The Revolution, and it was going to be like a reboot to Homefront. Why? It was supposed to be like a reimagining, like completely overhauling the setting and stuff, so I don't know why they had to keep the Homefront name and why they spent $500,000 getting the rights to it, but I digress. Deep Silver, another video game publisher who had been picking
gas. Deep Silver is gas. I'm not just saying that because they sponsored me before, my other channel. Deep Silver is gas. I love Deep Silver for putting out fucking Dead Island. That's the only thing I care about. Deep Silver is gas as a
different
publisher.
properties from THQ also agreed to co-publish this game with Crytek. Here's what I think is the most interesting thing here. Let's back all the way up to Chaos Studios, the development team that made the first Homefront game, and THQ also is responsible for this, but had Homefront 1 been like a polished experience, like had THQ really allocated things properly, given them enough time, enough runway, had the right minds, and the development team was able to execute properly, right? Like it wasn't like a rushed game that wasn't as cool as people hoped it to be, everything would have been different, and Crytek wouldn't have been in the position that they were in by the time that they were working on Homefront: The Revolution. I don't know why Crytek decided to purchase the rights to Homefront. I feel like that was a pretty risky play, which would lead to their own downfall, but in a way, Homefront 1 did so poorly, it not only caused the studio to close down, it caused the publisher to close down, and it caused another studio that wasn't even involved in Homefront 1 to
that game
eventually
just cursed, bro. Don't even touch
too.
it.
But that was like a snowball effect because, I mean, Crytek did choose to purchase the rights here. During development of Homefront: The Revolution, Crytek was faced with a lot of financial issues themselves. By 2014, there were reports circulating around that the company was like missing wage payments. They were like allegedly withholding bonuses, and employees were filing grievances, sometimes not even showing up to work.
2014 does not feel like it was that
Crytek
far away.
straight up denied that any of this stuff was happening. But later on, they kind of were like, we're in this like transitional phase, and you know, we needed to secure some capital for future projects. You know,
it's just so nostalgic looking at games that look like that,
they
though.
always use in these types of things.
What does that mean? I need media training.
So after Crytek bought the rights to Homefront, they realized they didn't have enough money, so they decided to sell Homefront before the game was done. So they ended up selling it to Koch Media, I think that's how you pronounce it, Koch Media, who's the parent company of Deep Silver, that company that was going to co-publish this game. That also meant Crytek was no longer developing Homefront: The Revolution. I want to pull my hair out. This is insane. Instead, Deep Silver's studio, Dambuster Studios, would be taking over. And development on that game would be handed off to them. But just to clarify this, to not lead to more confusion, this was
a PS4
Crytek
era game.
UK, right? The Free Radical design team, not just the overall Crytek team.
This is still a part of them shutting down 3 times.
No longer in charge of the game, except it was more confusing because in the acquisition by Deep Silver, they also, I guess, purchased that section of the studio. I don't know how that works, but the company staff was actually pretty unclear early on whether or not the company had been shut down for a while. However, all of the staff ended up getting transferred to that brand new Dambuster Studios under Deep Silver. So they at least didn't lose their jobs, but they got like transferred to a different company in that whole acquisition process after everything. And they did get to...
That is crazy because that happens all the fucking time. That I've literally witnessed that happen at one of the places that I used to work at. Dead ass, bro. And then, you know, a new company comes over and then they get rid of all the leadership, all managers and stuff like that. And that's what happened to me at one job. Yeah, they got rid of managers. And I was like, fuck.
Continue working on Homefront: The Revolution, at the very least, the game that they had worked on.
And I was an inventory
but
manager.
The original Free Radical design was officially dead at this point, until it wasn't anymore. Now, you could ask yourself, why did Crytek UK run out of money when they were so confident that they were able to even acquire Homefront: The Revolution in the first place? Well, they had been banking on some other projects they were working on, specifically Crisis 3, which...
Crisis, not too hard on them, bro. Stop it. Crisis was a gas franchise. Not too hard on it. I'll skip past it, bro.
That's great. They assisted the studio on that one.
Not
but
too
they
much
also
on
worked on Warface, that like, I don't know, shooter game that was kind of like a Call of Duty knockoff. I don't think this game ended up becoming nearly as big or blew up nearly as much as people expect.
Am I the only one that gets super nostalgic looking at
knockoff? I don't think this game ended
like red dot sites that look like this? Call of Duty, Black Ops 1 specifically, fucking revolutionized. I don't know what it is, bro. I look at this and I just think I'm playing Call of Duty Black Ops 1. And I love looking at games that look like this. If we continuously had more shooters that just had this type of aesthetic, I'd play more shooters. But it does feel like every shooter is like the same copy and paste bullshit nowadays, where I felt like, I know this is probably gonna not make any sense to a lot of people. It did kind of feel like a lot of shooters back in the day had some kind of identity to them. Like, again, I can bring up example, okay, COD, right? And then each individual COD before used to have like an actual identity to them. And then you look at a game like Resistance, had its own sort of identity to it. Then you look at Killzone, sort of kind of had its own identity with the kill gas and shit. Like, shit really don't feel like that anymore. It doesn't, like Halo has its own identity. It doesn't feel like shit has an identity anymore. I gotta be honest, man. I just gotta be honest, bro. I wish we had more identity in shooters.
Becoming nearly as big or blew up nearly as much as people expected it to. But it did last quite a long time before it seemed like updates slowed down. It's just something that kind of existed and people forgot about. I think the fact
and
that
like you can always tell sorta an era of when a game came out too.
Warface didn't like become explosively
Everything wants to be like the most hyper realistic shit now. Give me an art style, bro.
Popular allowed Crytek to not be as important for the future. They weren't able to give themselves the job security that they needed. In 2014, this is so stupid, after Crytek UK shut down and everyone moved to Dambuster Studios or whatever.
Which is why we never got that's why we never got the fourth game.
That was it until 2021 when Embracer Group announced we're going to be opening up Free Radical Design again. We're going to reform it as a subsidiary under Deep Silver. And they were going to bring Time Splitters back to life, which was really exciting. And they had brought back Steve Ellis and David Doak, who were a core part of the original team. And their new studio is going to
I don't know if you should do that if the original team got fucked over for their decisions in the first place.
be based in Nottingham, which is, I guess, where the original Free Radical Design opened up. It was pretty cool to have some industry veterans coming back to their franchise after all these years, and they were going to finally make the sequel that people have been wanting for years. So it's weird though, with Time Splitters 4 in development for quite some time. In November 2023, it was reported that the company was set to close down in December. Embracer Group had been restructuring. I guess in 2022, they had established like this $2 billion investment deal into their company. There was some verbal agreements, but it failed to come together, and one of the investing partners walked away from the deal. This then caused Embracer Group's shares to drop dramatically, and in turn to try to save the company, they announced that they would be closing different studios and also doing a ton of cost-saving measures. Like 904 employees lost their job and at least 15 projects. They also like sold off some of their studios too. It was like a whole thing. And unfortunately, it seemed like Time Splitters 4 and the rebooted Free Radical Design would get shut down. This time to no fault of a single game, but just, you know, unfortunate circumstances that were pretty shitty. I don't know.
Coming off the heels of Prey 2017, which was critically acclaimed and was enjoyed by quite a lot of people, Arcane Austin had established themselves as a studio to look out for. Plus, they were part of Bethesda, which obviously is one of the most beloved game companies of all time.
Bethesda Softworks is the same thing as Bethesda. As the game studios.
And yes, I know people whine about their releases a lot in the past decade, but they still make much, much better games than 99% of the game companies out there, so I don't care. Anyways, naturally, when they announced their game Redfall at E3 2021 with a CGI trailer, people seem to be
bro, y'all remember E3 used to be a thing? Y'all remember that? Am I the only one? I'm the only one remember. E3 used to actually be a thing. Yeah, that was cool. I remember E3. E3 used to be like E3 was the event to look forward to. I remember getting so excited when I heard the words E3. I would be like, "Oh, we're about to get like a crazy amount of shit." Yeah, but now it's just like Summer Games Fest, Game Awards, Jeff Keighley. No shade to him, just saying like E3. I'd love to have E3 back. E3 was so gas.
Somewhat interested in what they were cooking, and the studio went all out.
Oh, Redfall. Yeah. They didn't get enough development time, and the people that was developing the game didn't even want to develop the game. Like everybody
saying that this was going to be their
It
next
was very
big title,
vocal about
and
it,
that this
too.
was going to feel like a true Arcane game. Expectations were pretty high, though there was already some people who did not really care for the overall vibe of Redfall, even with the CGI trailer. And when the game did release 2 years later, it was one of the worst.
It didn't have any of the features that they actually promised. That's something you don't
games
ever
to
want to
release
do.
of
with a lot
this
of the game.
decade. Metacritic in the mid-50s, a technical mess of a game through and through, and one of the most generic and boring stories and settings of any video game I've ever played. And yes, me and Elijah beat this game. There's a full video of our experience playing this game 2 years after it launched or whenever we did the video. And it was not a good game. It was really boring. And even then was still very buggy and we ran into a lot of issues. Nonetheless, since this is a video about studios that got killed by their games, you can probably guess what happened to Arcane Austin. And that does bear the question, what happened? How does a studio go from making a high-rated game like Prey 2017 to a buggy vampire shooter like Redfall that kills the entire studio with it?
Studio heads. That's what happened.
And well, I'm about to answer the question, I guess. Honestly, it all started
forced to
even
make it.
before Prey 2017 really released, because ZeniMax, the parent company of Bethesda,
Yup. That's what I'm saying,
and
bro.
also Arcane Austin with that, made a general push for games as a service with all their studios. They figured that life as a service is the next big thing, and if they force this onto all...
Yep. Join the club. They said that along with literally every fucking body else. Literally everybody fucking else. It wasn't. It's
their
just.
studios
It's just
are
not
gonna
there,
make
bro.
more
It's not a
money,
good-
and
it's
that's
not a good
when we
play.
got Fallout 76, for example. And shortly after Prey 27 release, Arcane Austin was also tasked with making a live service game to broaden appeal and to make that money from microtransactions that ZeniMax is now after. This was a complete mismatch from day one with what Arcane Austin just had established themselves as a strong single-player studio, and with that change,
And Sony tried to do the same thing. They said, "Hey, yo, Naughty Dog, I know y'all just put out that banger of a game, Last of Us. I know you working on the second game. I need y'all to put some multiplayer up in that bitch. And then after you put Last of Us 2 out, hey, I see you're not putting multiplayer in it. Let's just work on a new multiplayer game." They said, "Nah, we not." They was heavy in development for a multiplayer game. They did the same thing for Santa Monica Studios. They was like, "Yeah, we want you to make like a multiplayer God of War game." Huh? What? Huh? What are we talking about?
the studio started
Stupid.
falling apart internally. A staggering 70% of the staff who made Prey
Rocksteady? Huh? Yeah, man, we know y'all did great with the Arkham series, but make a yeah. Instead of making something that people would actually enjoy, like a very more polished up version of Gotham Knights, which I loved Gotham Knights. There's a whole playthrough of that on the other channel. I fucking love that shit. But instead of making a polished up version of that, let's make a dumpster fire of a game called Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League, and we'll just essentially get rid of all of this team leads that you guys had for the Arkham series, and we'll just get a whole new team in it. Essentially, we're just going to gut the company, remove everybody that was great at it, and we're just going to say, hey, you guys are full of interns and new people. Make a fucking game on the scale and at the same level of the Arkham series. Yeah, do that, please, but make it co-op. Like, you're asking a single player studio to fucking make an awesome co-op game. It's not. That's not their identity. They don't know what the fuck to do. That is like shit,
They
bro.
left
Studio
during
heads need to
Redfall's
stop doing
development.
that.
As part of that, all the veterans
Stop
who
doing
understood
that.
Arkane's way
Stop
of
it.
making
You're allergic to
single-player
money.
games,
You're killing
and,
yourself.
probably had some good input on Prey 2017, didn't want anything to do with a live service game like Redfall, and they just left. Also, hiring new people
See,
was
that's
kind
the
of
thing.
hard
They'll just
because people
leave
would
or
apply
they
with
get
a game
fired.
like Prey in mind, and then they would find out that it was a live service slop game like Redfall. They didn't really want to work on it either. So, to fill the gaps, they had to rely on external support and outsourcing, which obviously then it's not an Arcane Austin game at all anymore.
Exactly.
And, it loses even more of its feel and it dilutes the studio's vision even more. And what's crazy is that during the 2021 buyout of Microsoft, developers later went on record saying that they literally hoped Microsoft would look at Redfall and cancel the entire project. Like they were praying for Microsoft to put them out of their misery. That's how bad it was. But instead of Microsoft doing that, they let ZeniMax keep running themselves basically. They took a hands-off approach and they didn't really audit Redfall or any projects they're
that's the
working
thing.
on.
And you
And
don't
they
want
didn't really
your
ask if
team
this was a
thinking
game
that.
worth making at all. The only thing they really did is just cancel the PS5 version of Redfall. But another change that happened during this time was that they did also scale back on the microtransactions, since games like Avengers tried the same thing and failed. So now the main reason for this being a live service game were kind of gone or minimized, but the rest of the game, its core, was designed around that and around being
Gotham
crying and
Knights.
stuff
So
like that.
so many of these games came out. Gotham Knights, Redfall, Suicide Squad, Killer Justice League, Marvel Avengers.
So now the core didn't really have a point and it was even further flawed. And I'm not trying to say it's a bad thing at all.
Not too much on that story mode though. The Marvel Avengers story mode was pretty gas.
That they, scaled down the microtransactions, but they had
It's just
designed
everything
the whole
else
game
was
around it basically,
dog
and
shit.
now it's gone. So what's the point of this even? But at the time, this was all behind the scenes, and it wasn't publicly known until after release. But the first public controversy came
Luke Stevens knew. That motherfucker be putting out some quality videos.
shortly before launch. Arcane announced the game is
Always a
locked to
skeptic.
30 FPS on Xbox Series X. This was a joke. Microsoft marketed the Xbox Series X as the most powerful console ever made, with 60 FPS
Which
and up
it
to
technically
120
is.
FPS being the standard expectation for first-party titles. And then for a flagship exclusive to launch at 30 FPS felt like a step backward. We could have had this in the Xbox One era at that point. It just undermined the whole value proposition of the Xbox Series X. And on top of that, nearly all the pre-release trailers and gameplay were 60 FPS. So they literally baited and switched
The game
anyone
does
who's
look good,
interested in
though.
the
I'm not
game
gonna say,
by clearly
visually.
marketing it as a 60 FPS experience, but then going back on it and saying,
And it's weird because I know a lot of people will be like, oh, every game looks good now. You would think so, but there's a certain level of polish that certain games just have that make you really visually say, I want to play this game because it looks good. And then there's other games that's just yeah, they have good graphics because everything has good. But there's a difference between it has good graphics and this shit looks good. The game looked good, but it visually is what I mean.
actually only 30, and then the launch came, and as I said, it was
And
a
it
disaster.
looked like it was gonna
Bad
have
game
a
design
vibe to
mixed
it,
with
too.
technical
Oh,
issues that
shit.
caused low reviews and no general interest in the game.
The
game
UI
quickly
reminds me
died as
of
players
Back 4
realized
Blood.
there is no real substance or longevity to this game, and even Phil Spencer, the CEO of Xbox, went on a podcast and apologized for Redfall, admitting that the internal mock reviews were flawed and that they were way off.
We under-delivered on that, and for that I apologize. It's not what I expect, not what I want, but it's ours to deliver.
So eventually, all future
Lucy
content
manned up to
DLC
it.
plans for Redfall were cancelled, which, mind you, they did sell a season pass for the DLC that was going to come out, and there was some people who paid $100 for this game, which included the base game and the season pass.
Goddamn.
And after one final update that added offline mode, this studio, Arcane Austin, was shut down in May 2024, and Redfall became the last game
At
they would
least
ever
they
make.
I
added an
can't make this
offline
video
mode.
without talking about
Not too much on Forspoken, bro. That combat was smooth and buttery and great. Had the essence of being a Final Fantasy. It just had everything else come late. The story, trash, bro. Did not care for the story. The beginning of the story, though, I actually liked. And then the world felt hollow. And then the fucking assets felt really low quality. That really pissed me off. And now it is forever meme. Is this a motherfucking dragon?
Forspoken. I mean,
I also wasn't very bothered by your bracelet, whatever. talking a lot.
Talked about Saints Row and how
Like everyone
bad
else
writing
was.
really can just kill a game easily. I mean, it just
Yeah,
makes
facts.
it cringe and then nobody wants
But
to
it
play
wasn't just the bad writing, dog. It literally wasn't even the bad writing. The world felt hollow. The assets felt low quality. Shit didn't connect well.
And Forspoken literally, I think, was that. The studio. They're called Luminous Productions, but they're essentially a branch of a different inner team.
They cooked with that combat, though. I still haven't seen a game touch this shit yet in terms of combat. Scale, like, bruh. That shit was so fun to play.
Within Square Enix. It was originally just called Business Division Number 2. You know, they got a name. And mind you, Square Enix is a Japanese company, but they brought in American writers. They made a Western writers room. And then the game came out, and like, it was supposed to be this big old hype single player game, but I don't think anybody fell for it. Like, I don't think anybody was like, man, this PlayStation 5 exclusive game and PC release game really looks like it's going to be the greatest game ever. Like, let's just listen to this real quick.
Did I just do that?
Well, definitely with my assistance.
I did not just do that.
We did.
I just move shit with my freaking mind! Yeah, okay, that is something I do now. I do magic, talk to Senju.
Hold the front door. Hold on. I'm sorry. Hold on. We gotta lock this shit in. Sorry for the jump scare of the music. Hold on. I gotta look up something.
I don't think anybody was like, man, this PlayStation.
Yeah, no. Hold on. We gotta look this shit up right now. Because if this is true, she just can't get a break, bro. Oh my gosh, bro. They sound the same. I looked up if the voice actor for Frey and Forspoken is voiced by the same voice for Korra from Legend of Korra. I'm telling you, they sound the same. Like, they sound so much of the same. Oh my lord, bro. That shit. Wow. I would be surprised if more people didn't think that as well. Okay, my fault. That's my fault.
PlayStation 5 exclusive game and PC release game really looks like it's going to be the greatest game
like,
ever.
With that in
let's
mind,
just listen to this real quick.
Did I just do that?
Well,
that doesn't sound like Korra to you?
I did not just do that.
We did.
I just move shit with my freaking mind! Yeah, okay, that is something I do now. I do magic, talk to sentient cuffs, kill jacked up beasts. You know what? I'll probably fly next.
Now you're just being ridiculous.
So is it any surprise that the game underperformed a little bit? The reception wasn't good, and then the game didn't do too well in sales. At the very
See, even with that though, it's like, again, I still don't think that the writing was the shit that brought it down. I truly think it was literally the world, bro. That shit, I'm telling you, the rocks just didn't connect. It's like certain artistic styles when you play the game make you feel hollow, and that game literally was the textbook definition, the textbook feeling of when you play an anime game and you say, damn, this shit feels like a really bad experience. That's what that shit felt like. I was like, what the fuck am I playing right now?
least, instead of seeing a full-on shutdown, Luminous Productions was merged back into Square Enix. They're like, all right, come home. You guys are going to be back to Business Division Number 2. I don't know if they actually went back to being called Business Division Number 2 or just everyone got like resent across the company, but at least it wasn't like a full-on nuke to the company. I'm sure some people still got laid off, unfortunately, but man, that game had some pretty heavy backlash when it came out just because of the dialogue. I think that's interesting.
This next game we're going to talk about has a little asterisk to it because the studio behind it did not fully shut down, but they decided to never develop a game again.
I bet that should be
so I think
scary
it kind of still
kinda
counts.
watch
Anyways, you guys
happen in an
remember
actual
that
building.
Lord of the Rings Gollum game from a couple years ago?
I was there 3,000 years ago.
You mean the modern game that came out that looks like a fucking PS2 game? Holy shit. Yeah.
The
And
game
not in a
that
good
quickly
way
became
either.
one of the lowest rated games on Metacritic and actually
Ever.
had pretty low ratings across the board. Even IGN only gave it a 4. That's like the lowest score they can give, I think. This is one of the worst games ever made. It has dated visuals, it looks like a PS3 era game, but it released in
Fuck,
2023. It was riddled
It
with
looks even
game-breaking
worse than
bugs that would like sometimes lock you in a level and you weren't able to progress.
I mean, people were doing
and just
speed runs
controlling
day
the character
one,
was
but it's shit.
very bad, and you know, the
Just
whole
drop it through the
sneaking
whole map.
around was very tedious, and it just wasn't a well-designed game.
What was really tedious is I watched somebody do a very cut up and edited video of getting the platinum in this game.
Like it
Holy
felt
shit, looks
very
like such an
bush league and
excruciating
very amateur. Like it
experience.
was not good at all. And this game was developed by Daedalic Entertainment, which you probably never heard of, but this is actually a small German indie studio. I met the co-founder of the studio at a gaming convention and talked with him a little bit. Basically, back in the day, they were a super small studio that made these point-and-click adventure games, and the humor in those was wacky and kind of dark sometimes.
I'm going to the pub with brats in tow. They aren't mine. Yeah, that's what my old man always said. And then he tied me and Macy up outside the pub.
But it like worked very well. And the main creative force was that co-founder that
fucking
I met
crazy.
called Pokey. And I don't think their games like Etna Breaks Out or the Deponia trilogy are super famous.
Man,
I
you
don't
can't even have humor like that.
I think
anymore.
any of you guys probably heard of these games, but I tell you, they were really good, like for what
You
they
lose
were. You could
sponsors
tell
and
they had a lot of
everything.
love and a vision behind it. And in Germany, they did see a decent success. I mean, nothing crazy, but still very good for a small indie studio. But after the success in 2014, they got acquired by a bigger German book publisher. And they wanted the studio to become a global player that could compete with Telltale or Quantic Dreams. And from there, the whole company changed. They wanted to make this a big operation.
That's
They
a
moved away
big
from
thing,
like
bro.
the cute
Telltale.
niche to the adventure games, and they wanted to make games that would appeal to a bigger audience. And obviously that didn't work out. The company started spiraling and it started struggling financially, and the games they released were constant failures. Like they released an RTS game called A Year of Rain, and a lot of the key people, including that Pokey guy that I talked about, left the studio and moved on to do other creative stuff. And by 2022, they would sell the company to another publisher called Nacom. And under this new management, things got even worse. Lower budget.
Hey, bro, not too much on Hell Is Us. That game is gas.
To another publisher called Nacom. And under this new management, things got even worse. Lower budgets, less money, and you know, they were just trying to squeeze the company for the last they had. And so the people that were tasked with making Gollum weren't really experienced in making 3D action games on a AAA scale in Unreal Engine 4. And it just was a bad choice. And apparently the budget for Gollum was around 15 million euros, which is not a lot for a game that was supposed to be a AAA game attached to
Yeah,
a
that's
license like Lord
nothing.
of the Rings. So the game came out, it flopped, it was awful, everybody clowned on it. And that caused his new owner to shut down any future development of games, and now Daedalic Entertainment, they're just a publisher now. And it seems like the days of them developing video games are completely gone.
Sega did the same thing.
Okay, now if you're a hardcore GameCube fan, here's a game that you probably haven't heard of.
so-
Luke, you
so
were a hardcore
satisfying to see.
GameCube fan, weren't you?
Yeah.
You sound confused by that answer.
Yeah, I don't know. I had a PlayStation 2.
Did you have a GameCube as a kid?
No, but my uncle had one. Does that count?
How are you calling yourself a GameCube fan? You didn't even own a GameCube. Have you ever owned a GameCube? I guess you had a Wii, right? And a Wii had a GameCube?
I had a Wii. Oh, yeah. I had a GameCube controller for the Wii.
Okay. Have you ever heard of a game called Giftpia?
No, who's Pia?
This was a game that released in Japan, and there was plans to localize the game for a North American release, and it probably would have been renamed to Giftopia, realistically, if you're looking at the words. But this game has intrigued me. As you know, I do Animal Crossing content on Rocket Elijah, but this was like a game that was very similar in like style to Animal Crossing, kind of, or
This shit looks like it have a horror twist to it or something.
a game that released like 2 years after Animal Crossing. I mean, look at this, right? It was a little bit quirkier with the comedy style, apparently. Of course, I haven't played this yet. I've only watched a lot of gameplay on it because I was really curious what this was, but there is a big emphasis on like interacting with other characters. The interesting thing is this game flopped so hard in Japan that the North American release of this game was canceled altogether. But our story on what we're actually talking about here begins when we look at the developer, a little studio known as Skip Ltd. They have a long history of making games specifically for Nintendo consoles. I think it's safe to say that they're pretty much a second-party developer. It's always confusing to me how like first and second-party developers work in like terminology regards. They weren't owned by Nintendo.
I've never really heard the term second-party developer.
They worked closely with Nintendo, and Nintendo published every single game that they ever worked on. So I feel like that's something, right? 2 years after Gift-Pia released, though, the game series we're talking about today released. Chibi Robo. Chibi Robo is relatively a sad story, I feel like, across the board. It had a very ambitious start. The first game did well. And then after that, things kind of went downhill when it came to Chibi Robo. But I just want to point this out. The first Chibi Robo game on the GameCube was known for not being a significant commercial success. And then they ported the game later to the Wii, which also didn't do too well. And then the DS version, which also had good reviews, didn't sell that well either. According to Wikipedia, in 2007, it was even referred to as the 5th most overlooked game of 2007. How does that even happen? How are you so overlooked that you don't even rank number 1 in the overlooked category? You're 5th place on the overlooked list, which is where
crazy.
people are going to overlook it even more. I don't know, like, it just sounds unlucky. So there was a third Chibi Robo game, but this time they were like, it's not
I don't get it. If it's not working, why are you still putting it out?
going to sell well in
Like, change the formula, I guess, is what I'm saying. Because you can continuously approach something that's not working, sure. But, like, you should probably change how it's created, maybe change the gameplay elements a little bit, give him a fresh reboot on the design aspect. I don't know, make people connect with it a little bit differently. If it's not hitting the way that you want it to hit, maybe you got to do some adjusting.
North America anyways, let's release it only in Japan. And from what I can tell, the third game didn't sell very well either. But they kept making more Chibi Robo games. They weren't going to let this stop them. They believed in Chibi Robo, and I guess Nintendo was believing in them too. Now, of course, they weren't just doing Chibi Robo games. They released other games during this time. A lot of Game Boy Advance games, some stuff on the DS, some Wii games, some WiiWare games.
Random
you ever heard of
DS games
Captain
all the
Rainbow
time.
for the Wii?
No.
I don't know. I'm looking it up, and it looks like this game also was a financial
That shit looks like Beautiful Joe.
disappointment. How did Skip stay open as long as they did? I don't understand. So the 3DS era comes around and Chibi Robo Photo Finder releases. And I feel like at this point, Chibi Robo was starting to lose the plot a little bit. Jesus Christ.
felt like they
Chibi
lost the
Robo
plot
was maybe
early.
losing the plot a little bit. The first Chibi Robo game was like this fun little platformer game, and you're in this like big house and you're this little robot. And by Chibi Robo Photo Finder, what are we doing here? We're not like clean.
Bro, there were so many games that came out that did some shit like this. Nobody cared, bro.
We're doing like little helpful tasks. We're trying to use the 3DS's augmented reality features and bring them to life. I don't want to do this. I don't know. I don't want to play a Chibi Robo game at all. Really.
Even as a kid, nobody cared about those. It was like, it was cool to use them every now and then, but nobody cared about them bitches, bro.
To tell you the truth. But it wasn't like the mainline big Chibi Robo game. This was kind of just like a little side eShop game, so we'll forgive it a little bit. But the last and final attempt was Chibi Robo Ziplash for the 3DS. This was 2015, so this is 10 years of Chibi Robo existing. There was even a Chibi Robo amiibo coming out to like get things going. I really think the development studios and maybe even Nintendo believe that Chibi Robo could become a big mascot character in the same way that like Kirby maybe was, right? Like showing up in Smash Bros and stuff. Because isn't Kirby considered a second party franchise? They were trying to set Chibi Robo up to become this big second party entity, and it just never happened.
When was the last huge Kirby game? Damn, bro. Kirby is also in that status of just like legendary characters that you just know. Even if you haven't played a bunch of their games, you just fucking know them. Zelda, Kirby, you know, like shit like that. That's like, damn, man.
What's really sad though is when Chibi Robo was doing its like big marketing push and like developers were talking about the game, some of the team was like, the future of this series is kind of dependent on how this game's received. There's even this interview with The Verge where one of the producers straight up says, if this game doesn't sell well, it's going to be the last game in the series. Just like that. He put it out there. The game did not
you've
sell
been putting
well
the game
at all.
out for
And
10 years. You would think that you would have came to that decision way earlier.
it's a shame because I think if they would have just
But I get it though. If you really believe in something, you just keep on pushing for it.
made a Chibi Robo game more in line to what the first Chibi Robo was on the GameCube and not like attempt to do something different every single time, maybe it could have done better. I don't know. I really don't know. Like, I don't see the appeal in Chibi Robo. It did recently come out on the GameCube Switch Online thing, the first one, so I am going to sit down and play it very soon. So I'm excited for at least that one. I don't know if I'll dive into the other Chibi Robo games. So not only were the reviews also very, very not good, the game not selling well definitely kind of was the last nail in the coffin. The company did go under, or it dissolved, right? But what's weird about this, but like nobody knew it dissolved. There was never an official announcement. There was no press statement. It was just like people were like, hey, what's Skip LTD up?
You know, it's almost even sadder to think they probably didn't do anything in regards of a press release because they probably just thought nobody really gives a shit anyway. Clearly, look at the numbers that we have. So, you know, they probably just came to a conclusion of like, fuck it, we're just gonna do it this way.
We haven't heard from them in a while. And they like do some digging. Their website was down. People started looking at some of the former staff members and they were working at different companies, and that was it. But in like 2018, after 3 years of nothing, Nintendo tweeted this picture, and it's this like fiery Chibi Robo. Like, this is our boy Chibi Robo literally on fire. And you guys know Nintendo fans, they are completely normal people that don't think everything's a conspiracy theory. So they immediately thought that there was a new Chibi Robo game on the way, and it was about to be announced imminently.
Yeah, right.
At the next Nintendo Direct. The next Nintendo Direct came, and there was no Chibi Robo. And slowly people realized the company had been shut down. So maybe the image of the fiery Chibi Robo was Nintendo being like, hey, the character's dead. That's it. This is the last you're going to see of him. Now, Luke, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
With Chibi Robo,
it's crazy that the whole, like, Nintendo itself had to put out the statement for the company, basically.
Track record here, right?
Mm-hmm.
Would you want to see more Chibi Robo?
Fuck no.
No.
Well, guess what? A lot of the developers who worked on Chibi Robo recently spun off and started their own studio and kickstarted a spiritual sequel to Chibi Robo called Co-Robo. And they raised over $150,000. But I'll give them credit where credit's due. This game looks more like a sequel to the original GameCube Chibi Robo than literally any actual sequel to Chibi Robo. But it's just a wild ride. Like, after so many failures,
you better hope that shit connects, man, because the original came out GameCube and the current gamer base are not playing games.
For them to come back and be like, you know what?
In fact, there are such a few amount of games that people are playing of those same styles, probably hidden in 2 handfuls.
Let's bring Chibi Robo back one more time.
You could probably put it in 2 handfuls.
Maybe it'll be good. Someone out there is liking it. I mean, they funded it. 2,000 backers on Kickstarter. Someone pledged $2,091 to turn one of your own pets into Tom's cuddly toys. Someone also paid $1,900 to work with the team to design a toy that fits into the world. And then someone paid $1,500 to meet the development team. Nobody pledged $6,000 for the highest tier, though. It would allow you to appear in the game as an NPC. You'll send us a photo and we'll make a 3D model of you so you can be a part of the family. Luke, we missed out on this. Also, in the last update for
sending them no
they announced that
$6,000.
they were delaying the game and they were going to make their December 2025 release date. Maybe later this year, they said. So that's neat. They did show off gameplay, so the game does exist though. So have that going for it.
Immortals of Avium and Alone in the Dark in their respective studios, Ascendant and Pieces, have similar stories in a way, even though their gameplay and genre are completely different. One is a high-octane magic shooter.
You know, I didn't play them. I just didn't play them. I just heard a lot about them.
And the other one is a slow burn survival horror reboot of a old franchise from like the 90s. But the downfall of the developers behind these 2 games.
And I heard that the original Alone in the Dark was something really be mentioned. Like, I heard that it was like just one of the greatest horror experiences back in the
follows a very similar pattern. In the last couple of years, many closures and layoffs happened at big studios and a lot of games got cancelled. And I believe that it is because during the 2020 to 2021 pandemic, when everybody was at home, the games industry grew massively, rapidly, in a very quick fashion. And during that time, a lot of companies projected that it's gonna stay that way, and a lot of projects were greenlit by massive publishers during that time.
You know, and in this game, Immortal, it never looked bad to me. Everything that I've seen of it never looked bad. It just didn't gain a fan base.
In the case of Immortals of Avium, EA partnered with the studio Ascendant.
And that's why You put EA on anything in today's market, it's gonna fail, bro. Nobody gives a fuck about EA, man.
Which was an independent
They just don't
studio
have the
formed by
public.
veteran
They don't
Dead
have the
Space and
public
Call of
space
Duty
anymore.
developers. And in the case of Alone in the Dark, Embracer Group greenlit Pieces, which was their own studio, to make that game. And both these games were not small indie projects. Both of
That dude looks like a ripoff of the mode from RE7.
them were bigger projects.
Tell me this does not look like the mode features from RE7.
Greenlit Pieces, which was their own studio, to make that game.
You can't.
And both these games
That
were
is the
not
mode.
small indie projects. Both of them were bigger projects that costed tens and tens of millions of dollars. So when they
Again, you put EA's name on it, nobody wants to touch it
released
anyway.
in late 2023 and early 2024, both of them did not do well. Both received
See, they're smart. No, never mind. I was gonna say it would have been smart of them to not include EA originals on the actual box art.
mid reviews because of their technical issues and planned gameplay, and just overall there wasn't any demand for this, and that led to the games not selling well at all. And on top of that, both of them competed against much stronger titles that were releasing around the time.
Forget Baldur's Gate. The GOAT Spider-Man 2 came out around that time. And hold on before you start clacking in the fucking comments. Baldur's Gate 3 does deserve to put that fucking spot at Game of the Year, okay? I'm just saying. If you remove Baldur's Gate, this game was competing with Spider-Man 2. You remove Spider-Man's 2, this game is still competing with all the other high contender games that came out during that time.
Both of these games released individually. So, with the massive costs of development of both,
it did have a gas trailer though.
Both of these games,
Immortals of
and then them not
Avium?
selling well
Atrium?
because, you know, they're just kind of like not that good of games. Both studios behind the games fell apart. Pieces was shut down in June 2024, and Ascendant did major layoffs 1 month after the release, and then put the rest of their employees that were still left on mandatory leave. And as far as I can tell, they have been radio silent since, so it's pretty safe to assume that they're also shut down. And since they were an independent studio, it's not like EA closed them. They probably just didn't get any more funding from a publisher. And yeah, I mean, of course, as I said, both of them are very different games, and both of
I've
them
always
have a
thought
lot
about
of
that because I really do want to like make my own game or games in general. Oh, but you have to get funding from a publisher. You have to.
individuals.
And then you have to decide how much of that money that you're getting from the publisher is going to be your own personal funds. Like, because you're basically having to get paid to make the game. And then you have to get paid to like actually put the game out, like create the game and hire staff and all that. Then there's the marketing.
Shortcomings, why they weren't received well. But I think what is important to remember about this is neither of them would have gotten greenlit today. And I think they just exist because of that 2020 to 2021 bubble in the games industry, which I mean, a lot of games that released in the last 2 years pretty much fell into that. And I mean, you know, a lot of
because they were in
very
development during that
AA
time,
or AAA titles,
which is the weird
released
thing.
nowadays.
We're getting a lot of like mixed games net right now because the gaming industry is in a situation where 2024, I would say 2024 and up, and it's probably going to continue, I would say, up until 2028, maybe 2029, is the rest of this era of gaming is going to be plagued by games that were greenlit during COVID, because some games just in general take fucking 3 years just to even get through the cycle of development, 5 years to actually come out and shit. When it's like a first game in a series, when it's a conception, when it's a sequel, it takes usually way less time because they already have generated assets and things that they had already came up with. They came up with a story, so now they just got to build upon that. Unless you're changing a lot of things up for like a sequel or like a third game, basically. But when you have the majority of your assets built out, then you just have to build upon the story and make like a new environment, new area. You already learned the engine. Things get a little bit easier the second time around. They just do. But building it out for the first time, yeah, bro, that shit could take a fucking decade.
And then they fail and the studio's shut down. And that's why we get to make this video. And there's more. In 2003, a bunch of high-profile developers involved with Diablo 1 and 2, including the creator of Diablo, left Blizzard North, and they formed their own studio called Flagship Studios. And they had this idea to make Diablo but in 3D. So they got to work, and in 2005 they announced a game called Hellgate London for Windows PC. And this was a game set in a dark post-apocalyptic
2003?
London where you go around and you fight demons and you use swords and guns and stuff. This, interestingly enough, is one of the first true looter shooters. That's kind of cool for like the mid 2000s. And they also were gonna have
in a
randomly
sense.
generated levels.
I would say
which
Borderlands
is also
popularized
something
it,
that
though.
wasn't very common for shooter games back then. Since
Definitely
they
Borderlands
were
popularized
such
it.
high-profile people, like, you know, they created Diablo 1 and 2, and, you know, there were Blizzard employees for a long time. Firstly, a ton of people were interested in this, and, you know, it got some hype. And secondly, they were able to get publishing deals with EA and Bandai Namco, since, you know, they had the contacts from their time at Blizzard. And on paper, this all sounds very good. Once the game actually released, it went straight to because once people played it, they realized this is kind of a mess. Memory leaked, which meant the game would constantly crash, and the reviews also were pretty mixed because of all these technical issues.
Bro, memory leaks is something that we're all still struggling with. Marvel Tokon Fighting Souls just came out. And PlayStation adding PSN to that shit is literally killing the game on PC.
The real kicker is, though, that they sold this game for...
Newsflash, that's why I haven't played the full release yet. It's because I've been seeing, and I've watched that stream from Maximilian.
$50 in 2007 when it launched, and that included a bunch of base content, but they also launched with a $9.99 a month subscription that would unlock more content. That's kind of stupid because they made more content pre-release so they can sell it to you for $9.99 a month, but they didn't spend any time and money on actually fixing up the game. So that instantly left a bad taste in a lot of people's mouth. Also, for a limited time, they offered a $150 lifetime subscription edition that you could buy, which makes it even worse because there's surely some people who spend $150 on this game. They were kind of banking on the subscription model to take off and, like, you know, bring in some revenue each month so they can pay back the debt to the bank that they had taken out for the development and also fund future development. And they were also working on a second game called Mythos at the time, which was going to be a similar style gameplay to Diablo and did actually enter closed beta testing in 2007 as well. So this was also a massive project they were handling at the same time. They just needed money and they were hoping the subscriptions were gonna bring that in. That didn't happen because, like, the game was broken. Nobody wanted to pay even more money to play even more broken content. And less than 1 year after Hellgate's launch, the bank that they loaned the money from for the development of Hellgate ceased everything, like their computers, their desks, and all the rights to...
Bro, they said, nah, little bro. Nah, little bro. Nah, little bro, we can't let you keep going, little bro. You got to give us back your computers, your desk. Matter of fact, didn't you get those shoes with the company money that I gave you for that bonus? I'm gonna need them shits too, bro. Got the company head, the CEO, talking about some my Gucci loafers.
Both
like,
their games, actually. They took Hellgate and Mythos from them. And with that, they were shut down. And that was the end of the studio, but that actually wasn't the end of Hellgate London because the game server would actually stay on till February 1st of 2009 because apparently Bandai Namco provided server support, even though Flagship was already shut down. And then later on, after the servers were shut down, the game got sold to a Korean company and they redeveloped it, and they used like leftover stuff from like the post-launch content they were working on at Flagship Studios. And then in 2011, they released it as a free-to-play title, exclusively in Korea at first, I believe. And eventually they put out Hellgate Global, which was even more content, but that shut down in 2016.
That shit looks
now
like
you can buy Hellgate London still on Steam, but apparently it's like the last updated version of the 2016 Hellgate Global, like the Korean redeveloped, but they redeveloped it as a single player game again and put it on Steam. So for $13 you can buy this like redeveloped game from like the Diablo creators. Kind of weird.
That is so confusing.
Yeah.
It's a mess. And that same company did buy the unfinished project Mythos as well, and they would continue development on it and even release it into open beta, but it only lasted like 2 years before that was shut down. And I don't think that ever made it out of beta.
That shit looks
and then
fun
randomly,
too.
like years later in 2022, they would release this one on Steam as well, redeveloped as a single player experience, like they did with the Hellgate Steam version. Just kind of crazy how everything unfolded.
All right, Luke, I'm going to ask you a couple of games and you're going to tell me if
no,
you've
them shits
played
look
them
kinda
or
fun.
heard of them or never heard of them, okay?
Okay.
These should be all games that you've heard of. Obviously, Project Gotham Racing.
Okay. Yes,
Nope, never heard of that one.
And you know Geometry Wars.
Yes, I've played that too.
And I know
that.
you played a bunch of Fur Fighters back in the day.
I don't know what that is.
You don't know what Fur Fighters is, dude?
I don't know what Fur Fight is.
I thought that was like your favorite game of all time. I just assumed you played a bunch of Fur Fighters. It's just a goofy PS2 and Dreamcast game. None of it's really that important. What's important is the studio. Bizarre Creations. They made all of these games. And with that track record of Project Gotham Racing, Geometry Wars, Fur Fighters, I guess they were like a pretty prestigious studio, enough for Activision to purchase them in 2007. They purchased them for $107 million with like an asterisk on it, where $67.4 million were immediately payable, and the other $40 million was contingent that the studio hit certain goals over the next 5-year period. So we have from 2007 to 2010, where Bizarre Creations is under Activision, and things get real goofy here. The big turning point was during this 3-year development cycle, there was 2 big games.
I will say
that
though,
Bizarre Creations were working on.
2007 to 2010,
Activision, like, hey,
wasn't that bad.
This was a good investment. We can make good AAA games. And those 2 games that released were Blur and James Bond 007 Bloodstone.
That 007 game was garbage. Sorry. Every 007 game, I went over this when I was playing the 007 First Light game. Every 007 game that came out after Nightfire was just not good. I mean, Everything or Nothing was like probably my favorite one just because of the music and then it being co-op and shit. But if we being for real, Nightfire was like, oh my God, man. All these other ones was like, whatever.
So Blur was a great racing game, but it released in a year where there was a lot of competition. But it made sense for them to make a racing game after their time working on the PGR series, right? While they were working on this game series, you know, like Microsoft was like starting to build stuff with Forza, and there's other racing games like Split Second, which I don't think also sold that well, but it added more competition. And one of the leaders at the company also said in 2010 that the game maybe didn't perform too well because of another game called Mod Nation Racers. Honestly, you know, I can understand the comparison to Split Second being like, all right, like it's another racing game. Mod Nation Racers, like, come on, bro.
But
like, you're gonna say this is the reason your game's not selling well?
Also, Need for Speed had a banger release that year. Hot Pursuit came out.
Oh, yeah. Then on the other side of things, there was Bloodstone, which originally, if you look at like the design docs and stuff, the game was likely supposed to release 1 year earlier, but then got delayed. Now, this wasn't like the worst game ever, but it definitely wasn't good. The reviews kind of reflected that. Like, the game had a high production value. They really were trying to make it feel like a sequel to the movie.
Isn't that weird though? Because like, weren't all the other good James Bond games like just like the movie?
Yes, but this was
sorta
released in that big like 5-year window between movies.
Sorta.
It's like between Quantum of Solace and whatever came after, right?
Sort of.
Yeah, Skyfall.
When the sky falls.
Whoa. We're not trying to get copyrighted.
Do you imagine if this game came out after Skyfall released? Or, you know what I mean? Like, it probably would have sold more. I don't know if it would have been better.
I ain't gonna hold you. You gotta time 007 releases like that. 007 games have to be like timed.
No, it definitely would have sold more, yeah. And more people would have been invested in the story, like if they wrote it as, because it's a prequel to Skyfall, right?
Technically, yeah. And the thing is, I think Activision was like, yo, this is the start of what we're gonna do. Because there's also like a bunch of stuff about a canceled sequel that would have also been built off of this. And that would have been developed by Raven Software, not this company. So they might have been doing like the alternate game development cycle, kind of like what Call of Duty has now. Nonetheless, these 2 games back to back in the same year definitely did not help Bizarre Creations' case for remaining open. And
both of those games, I deserve to get
2 weeks after the release of Bloodstone, Activision announced that it was considering closing the studio down. They didn't outright say it. They're like, we're going to explore our options and see maybe we can sell the business, but they were clear they didn't want them anymore. And I mean, that's got to kind of sting a little, right? I'm going to just read you this Activision statement. Over the past 3 years since our purchase of Bizarre Creations, the fundamentals of the racing genre have changed significantly. Although we have made a substantial investment in creating a new IP, Blur, it did not find a commercial audience. Bizarre Bizarre is a very talented team of developers. However, because of the broader economic factors impacting the market, we are exploring our options regarding the future of the studio, including a potential sale of the business. And after that statement, they looked for a potential buyer for less than 2 months, and then they said that they were going to shut the studio down. They did put out a little farewell video, and that was it.
You know, sometimes
I know people was looking at that shit like, fuck no, we're not buying that.
studios have different locations in different cities, and sometimes a different location gets put in charge of a major franchise, even though this other location never really
Mass
worked
Effect.
on a game by themselves.
I look at that shit, I already know what it is, bro. It's Mass Effect.
They made Mass Effect Andromeda. So usually Mass Effect was the
I was so excited for Mass Effect Andromeda, and I have the disc somewhere. I tell you how disappointed I was at that game.
developed in the past by BioWare Edmonton, and they were busy during the time because they were working on Anthem.
Like, how do you think?
So,
I just don't get it. How do you
so
think
with that
Mass
in
Effect
mind,
and then
BioWare
come up with
Montreal
that game?
was put in charge of making the next Mass
what
Effect
throws
game.
me for a
In
loop.
2012, they
Came up
started
with Mass
development on
Effect.
that. It was already kind of a
like
bad
in your
start
mind, and then you came up with
because,
this
like,
game.
You know, they never made a game. They made some DLC and multiplayer support for Mass Effect before. Now they have to make a Mass Effect game, a follow-up on one of the best video game trilogies of all time, probably. And EA mandated that they would use the Frostbite 3 engine, which was designed for Battlefield, a first-person shooter game, and not a RPG like Mass Effect. So a bunch of development time early on was spent on making RPG systems for Frostbite 3, and a bunch of time was also spent during the early years making like systems for procedurally generating planets. But after 3 years, they realized this actually is not going to work out, and they scrapped most of what they had at this point. And 3 years into development, they didn't have a game to show for it. They couldn't like release. They basically made Mass Effect Andromeda the way that it released in the last 18 months of the 5-year development cycle. So there was like a bunch of like...
That is just so disrespectful to Mass Effect 2, man. Mass Effect is just such a good franchise.
Issues internally and stuff like that. And obviously, we all know Mass Effect Andromeda, when it released, it was awful, and, you know, everybody made fun of it. The game was just, like, not that good. Like, even if it wasn't broken, like, story-wise and, you know, character-wise, it was just a step down. And this game put the Mass Effect IP on ice, and it's been 9 years since we've gotten the new Mass Effect, and it's ongoing. I don't know when we'll get one or if we'll ever get one again. And just 5 months after the release of Mass Effect Andromeda, EA announced that BioWare Montreal would be merged into EA Motive, effectively shutting them down. And EA Motive is just a support studio for DICE, basically. Like, I think they supported Battlefront 2 and now Battlefield 6. So that's kind of all they're doing nowadays. Oh, they did make the Dead Space remake, so I guess they were allowed to make a remake. There was actually more plans for single-player DLC for Mass Effect Andromeda, which still was cancelled with this shutdown of BioWare Montreal. But also, Anthem in a way killed them. I just want to point that out. So,
you know what the development though of Mass Effect Andromeda really reminds me of after hearing you explain it?
What?
Fable 4?
Yeah?
Because right now we have the development studio behind Forza Horizon making the next Fable game, and that game's in development hell for quite some time.
Really? Bro, I'm excited as hell for a Fable. Oh my gosh, what?
There was a lot of speculation that they were
Is that why it's been
struggling to
taking
figure
for so
out
long?
how to use the
Is
Forza
that why
tech
it's been
engine
taking so
for
long?
an RPG game. Apparently the game's coming out this year. Also, I find it interesting that this game is coming out this year, this new Fable game, but they have 2 games releasing this year because they're still making Forza Horizon 6.
I'm excited for Forza Horizon 6,
Which
but
that just came out.
It's probably gonna be booty cheeks.
Dude, it's gonna be like Forspoken, right? Like, there's no way it's not. Or Avowed or something.
I think in a way it'll be worse than both of those, because those were...
And the people that are looking at the Fable trailers are hyping it up like crazy, and to me I was like, sounds like a cool concept. Never really played Fable, but I really want to get into Fable. It looks really good. But now hearing that it's made by the people that made Forza, it's like, what do y'all know about making this type of...
That's not good.
Unestablished IPs. They were just like, you know, tries at making an IP. And Fable...
I could be surprised, though.
It's not that, you know. Fable has more to lose, I guess.
Did you know VG247 gave Avowed a perfect 5 out of 5? I was so bored with that game. I really wanted to like it, too.
I played it for 2 hours as well. Like, I don't know.
You like it?
No, it's boring.
Do you know the PlayStation 5 version's coming out in about a month?
Yeah, I won't be purchasing that.
Wait, Avowed isn't a new IP. Did you know that?
What is it then?
It's a part of the Pillars of Eternity like universe.
This doesn't sound like real. It sounds like some marketing bullshit. I'm not gonna lie. This is a new IP and they just slapped this shit on. Can maybe believe it.
Wait, hold on. We need to talk about Avowed at some point for like a video. We need to do an in-depth thing because I just pulled Avowed up because we were just talking about Fable. And did you know development started as an online multiplayer game?
No, what the hell?
Obsidian's leadership were preparing to sell the company and pitched Avowed as a mixture of Destiny and the Elder Scrolls V.
I mean, that sounds better than what we got.
And then Xbox bought the studio. Oh, that's what happened. They were working on something and then Xbox came in and was like, let's cut the multiplayer and make it a single player narrative thing.
I don't know how to explain it, but Avowed, Forspoken, like those are games I feel like if you told me ChatGPT made them, I could believe it. Like
that's crazy.
It feels so generic and boring. I don't know. There's like no.
I disagree
creativity.
though. I disagree. I do feel like Avowed had a good premise and everything that I've seen of it looked pretty interesting. I can't say I haven't played it myself, but I think it looked pretty interesting. Versus Forspoken, the thing that looked interesting about it was the combat. And some of the trailers made the story look really enticing, but as soon as you play it, dookie juice. But I would definitely not go as far as saying, oh yeah, you know, if somebody told me that AI made it, I could believe it. Like, no, it's just bad fucking
It's like
writers.
videos on Twitter where they're like, oh, look at this AI generated gameplay footage.
Yeah.
You're just like, yo, what am I looking at? It does look like the Pillars of Eternity thing was shoehorned in sometime after the game's reveal.
It has some bullshit. Reveal the game first and then add it to another IP. No, I don't count that. That's not real.
The game's reveal concerned the 80-person development team who were starting development again. We'll do a deep dive on Avowed.
So they had to say, hey man, this isn't really getting the reviews we want. What's that other franchise? And then they decided to tie it into the other franchise.
We talked
That's
about it. We're
crazy.
gonna look into this. This is some goofy stuff. Look at us revealing our plans in real time, a second video in a row.
I mean, like in the past, we had an idea with games that changed too much during development, like Halo Infinite and stuff like that.
Yeah, we just gotta like search engine optimize.
So what's your next
games that goofed around? Thank you.
Okay.
If you're a YouTube member or
there we
patron,
go.
thank you so much for support.
All right, chat, we got to go on to the next thing. Before we do, my wife said that she needed me, so I'll be right back.
Lights down low, but spirits so high. Game controller in hand, ready to fly. The night's our playground where time stands still. In this cozy nook, let's get our thrill. Pencils shining bright in the midnight glow, leveling up in a world we know, laughing together as the hours drift by in this gaming sanctuary we touch the sky.